His name was Derek. And the first thing you need to know about Derek is that he folded his socks. Not balled them up the way most guys do, just shove them together and throw them in a drawer. He actually folded them into these little flat squares, and for whatever reason that detail is what I always come back to when I try to explain who he was to me, because that's Derek, careful, deliberate, someone who paid attention to small things that most people never noticed. We met junior year of college in the most boring way possible. We were assigned the same group project in an environmental policy class that neither of us actually wanted to be in. Our third group member, some guy named Trent, disappeared after the first meeting and never came back. So it was just the two of us, sitting in that corner booth of the library every Thursday night for 6 weeks, arguing over citation formats and splitting the last of whatever snacks Derek had packed in his bag. He always brought snacks, another Derek thing. I was out by then, had been since high school really. Not like publicly announce it at prom out, but my close friends knew, my family knew. It wasn't a secret I was carrying around anymore. So when Derek and I started spending time together and I felt that familiar thing creeping in, that warmth, that extra awareness of where someone is in a room, I clocked it immediately and I made myself set it aside. Because Derek was straight, clearly, obviously straight. He'd had a girlfriend since freshman year, Cassandra. He talked about her the way people talk about someone they're genuinely comfortable with, not in love with exactly, but settled into. You know that difference? There's a texture to it, a kind of fondness that's already a little tired around the edges. I noticed that too, but it wasn't my business. He was my friend, my best friend actually, by the time spring semester rolled around. That shift happened fast and it surprised both of us, I think. It wasn't some slow build. One Thursday we were strangers dividing up a bibliography, and by April we were texting at midnight about nothing, eating cereal together in my apartment at 2 a.m., and he was showing up at my door unannounced with a movie he wanted to watch and assuming it was fine because it always was. It was always fine. My roommate Priya watched the whole thing develop with this very specific expression on her face. She'd look at me sometimes when Derek left and she'd just raise one eyebrow barely, and I'd say don't, and she'd go back to whatever she was doing without saying a word. She was very good at making her point without having to make it. I told myself it was manageable, and mostly it was. I liked Derek as a person, I liked being around him. The fact that I was also attracted to him was just background noise, something I didn't feed, something I didn't talk about. Then Cassandra broke up with him. This was April? About 3 weeks before finals. She called him on a Tuesday evening, and by Tuesday night he was at my door with his jacket half on and this expression on his face like someone had rearranged all the furniture in a room he knew really well and now he couldn't figure out where to walk. I made him tea. He didn't even drink tea, but he sat there with it anyway, wrapped both hands around the mug and didn't say much for a long time. She said she hasn't felt it for a while, he finally said, like she'd been waiting for it to come back. That's a really hard thing to hear. Yeah, he looked at the tea. The worst part is I don't know if she's wrong. I didn't push that. He seemed like he needed that sentence to just sit there, not get picked apart, so I let it sit. He stayed until almost midnight. We watched something on TV, I don't even remember what, some nature documentary probably, and he fell asleep on my couch with his jacket still half on, and I put a blanket over him and went to bed. When I woke up in the morning, he was already gone, but he'd washed both mugs and left them on the drying rack. That was the first night he stayed. Over the next month it happened a few more times, not always because of Cassandra's stuff. Sometimes just because it was late and the parking situation near my building was better than near his, or because we'd been up talking and neither of us wanted to be the one to say, okay, time to go. The falling asleep on my couch became a kind of running joke between us, except it wasn't really a joke. It was just a thing that happened, a comfortable thing. Finals came and went, we both survived them, summer has started. And then about 3 weeks into summer, something shifted in him. I noticed it, but I couldn't name it at first. He got quieter in certain moments. Not depressed quiet, more like thinking quiet, the kind of quiet where you can see someone working something out in the background but they haven't figured out how to say it yet. I didn't ask, I figured he'd get there when he got there. We were at his apartment one Friday night in June. His roommate was home for the summer, so it was just Derek and a lot of slightly sad bachelor energy. We got takeout from this Thai place we both loved and we were eating it on the floor because his table was covered in stuff he'd been meaning to unpack since moving in 8 months ago. That was so Derek too. Very organized about small things, completely chaotic about large things. He was quiet through most of dinner, not awkwardly quiet, just somewhere else a little. Finally I said, "You okay?" He looked up, yeah, just thinking. About Cassandra. No, actually, he poked at his pad thai, about something else. I waited. I've been trying to figure out how to ask you something, he said, without making it weird. Okay. And I haven't figured it out, so I'm just going to ask. Okay, I said again. He looked right at me, not in an intense way, in a careful way, that deliberate Derek way. When you first figured out you were gay, was it a sudden thing, or did it kind of accumulate? I didn't show anything on my face, I don't think so, I'd gotten pretty good at that. It accumulated, I said. For a long time I just thought I was really appreciating guys aesthetically, like noticing that someone was attractive the way you'd notice a painting was good, and then at some point I realized I wanted to be in the painting, and then it clicked. He nodded slowly, and before it clicked, did you know? Somewhere, yeah, but I was working hard not to know. He was quiet again for a second, then, that's a really honest answer. You asked an honest question. He looked back down at his food. His jaw was doing this thing it does when he's processing something, this slight tension. I've studied that jaw more than I care to admit. I've just been thinking about some things, he said, and that was all. I didn't press, I told myself it was about Cassandra, about the breakup. About figuring out what he wanted from relationships. I gave it the most reasonable explanation I had and I put it on that shelf. We watched a movie afterward. He fell asleep at his own apartment for once, which was almost funny. I let myself out and drove home and sat in the parking lot of my building for maybe 10 minutes before going inside. Priya was still up. She took one look at me and said, "What happened?" "Nothing." She looked at me for another second. "Okay," she said, and went back to her book, not convinced, just letting me be. 2 weeks later, Derek texted me on a Saturday afternoon to ask if I wanted to go to this used bookstore that had just opened on Clement Street. We spent 2 hours there. He bought a book on Japanese woodworking and one on migratory bird patterns, which is very much Derek energy. I bought 2 novels I hadn't heard of and a battered copy of something I'd been meaning to reread. Walking back to his car, he said, casually looking at his bag of books, "I went on a date this week." "Yeah, how was it?" "Weird." He unlocked the car, unexpectedly weird. We got in, I waited for more. "It was with a guy," he said. I kept my face very still. "How did that go?" "That's why it was weird." He started the car. "I don't know what I was expecting. I thought it would feel like an experiment, kind of, something I was curious about but wouldn't actually feel anything during." He paused. "I felt things." The word hung there. "Did you like him?" I asked. "He was fine, nice, funny. I don't think I'd see him again, but that's not," he exhaled, "that's not really the point." "What is the point?" He glanced over at me while he pulled out of the parking spot, just a glance, quick. "I'm still working that out." I looked out the window. My heart was doing something loud and inconvenient, and I was telling it to stop it. "Well," I said, "I'm here if you want to talk about it, any of it." "I know," he said, "that's actually why it felt safe enough to try." I didn't say anything to that. I don't think I could have. We went back to my place. Priya was out. We made coffee and sat at the kitchen table and talked about the books we'd bought, and at some point the talking slowed down and it was just quiet, comfortable, the afternoon sun doing that long summer thing across the floor. Derek had his arms folded on the table and his head tilted sideways, and he was looking at me with this expression that I couldn't fully read, and I was pretending I didn't notice. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You keep asking me things." "I know, sorry." "Don't apologize." "What?" He hesitated, not in a nervous way, in a weighing something way. "Did you ever," he stopped, started again, "have you ever had feelings for someone you didn't act on because you thought it would complicate things? There are moments where the universe just hands you a question that is so perfectly aimed that you either have to be completely honest or completely dishonest, and there's no in between." I chose something in the middle, which was cowardly but human. "Yeah," I said, "more than once." He nodded, still looking at me. "How did you decide when it wasn't worth it to say anything?" "When I was pretty sure the other person didn't feel anything back," I said, "and saying something would just make them uncomfortable and cost me the friendship." He was quiet for a moment, then he said very carefully, "And if you weren't sure?" My coffee mug was warm in my hands. I focused on that. "I haven't been in that situation," I said, which was a lie, which we both maybe knew was a lie. Derek looked at me for another second, then he looked down at his own mug. Right, he said quietly, not closing the conversation, more like setting it down carefully to return to later. We didn't talk about it again that afternoon. That night he stayed late again. It wasn't planned, it just happened the way it always did. The conversation kept going, it got dark outside, neither of us made the move to wrap it up. Priya came home around 10, said hi to Derek like she'd been saying hi to Derek for a year because she had, and went to her room. Around 11 Derek's phone buzzed and he looked at it and then set it face down on the cushion. "You can get that. It's okay, it's my mom." "Derek." He laughed a little. "I'll call her tomorrow, she just wants to know if I'm coming home for my cousin's thing in July. I can't deal with that conversation tonight." "What's the thing?" "Birthday party, she's turning 7, my cousin, which means I have to be present and enthusiastic about a bounce house and I don't know 7-year-olds for 5 hours. That sounds exhausting." "It is, but she's really cute." He picked up his phone, looked at it, set it back down. "Can I just sleep here tonight? I don't feel like driving." It was so normal, it was so completely normal, and I was so tired of pretending normalcy didn't cost me anything. "Yeah," I said, "of course." We watched something for a while, I wasn't tracking it. At some point Derek stretched out along his end of the couch and I was on mine and we were just there in the low light, the TV going, familiar and easy and unbearable. He fell asleep before I did, he always falls asleep first. I watched him for a minute, I know that sounds, whatever it sounds like, but there's something about someone sleeping that's very honest. All the deliberateness leaves their face. Derek looks younger when he's asleep, softer, less like someone carefully managing the way he moves through the world. I turned the TV off and put the blanket over him and went to bed. And I lay there staring at the ceiling for probably an hour telling myself all the things I'd been telling myself for a year. That he was figuring something out and it wasn't about me. That the conversations we'd been having were him processing, not signaling. That I was building a story around looks and pauses and carefully chosen words because I wanted the story to be there, not because it was. I was pretty convinced, I almost believed it. I was almost asleep when I heard my door open. Not fast, slow, careful the way Derek does everything. I didn't say anything, I waited. "Hey," he said from the doorway, his voice was low, sleep rough. "Are you awake?" "Yeah." A pause. "Can I come in?" Something in my chest was very loud. "Yeah." He came and sat on the edge of my bed, not under the covers, just on top of them at the end by my feet. In the dark I could see his outline, his arms loose in his lap, his shoulders doing that thing where he's thinking something through. "I wasn't actually asleep," he said. "I know. You knew. Your breathing's different when you're asleep." He laughed, this short quiet thing, "Of course you know that." Neither of us said anything for a moment. "I've been thinking about that question I asked you," he said, "the one about not being sure." My heart was doing the thing again, I just waited. "I think I asked it badly," he said. "I wasn't asking in the abstract," he paused. "I was asking about you." I didn't move. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this for months," he said, "not because I was scared exactly, more because I couldn't work out what it even was, what I was feeling, whether it was," he exhaled, "whether it counted." "What does it count?" He looked over at me in the dark. "The way I feel about you." The room was very quiet. "Derek," I said, and then I didn't know what came after that. "I'm not trying to make this weird," he said. "I know this could be really weird, and if you just, I get it if this is too much. But I've been watching you not say something for so long and I just kept thinking if I don't say it first, one of us is going to let this whole thing just," he stopped. "I don't want to lose whatever this is by waiting." I sat up. He was right there, a foot away, looking at me with an expression I recognized because I'd felt it on my own face for a year, that terrifying, hopeful, trying not to hope thing. "How long?" I said. He thought about it, honestly, like he was actually trying to locate it. "I think maybe since February. There was this afternoon where you were explaining something about your family and you were laughing and I had this thought that I wanted to make you laugh like that, like it mattered that it was specifically me and not anyone else. And I didn't know what to do with that thought, so I filed it somewhere and kept filing things there, and eventually the file got too full." I laughed, couldn't help it. "Too full?" I repeated. "Yeah," he smiled, a little cautious still. I know how that sounds." "Derek," I was looking right at him. I have been so careful not to feel this for an entire year. His face did something, opened up a little. I didn't say anything because I thought you were straight and I thought saying it would cost me you, I said, and losing you felt worse than carrying it. I'm sorry you were carrying it, he said, and he meant it, I could hear it. You didn't know. Still. We sat with that for a second. I don't entirely know what I am, he said quietly. I want to be honest with you about that. I'm still figuring things out. This is new territory and I don't have a map, but I know what I feel when I'm around you, and I know I've never felt it about anyone else the way I feel it about you, so whatever label fits or doesn't fit, he stopped. That part I know. Something in me just gave way, the way a held breath finally releases. Okay, I said. He looked at me, okay. Okay. He exhaled, this long, quiet exhale like he'd been holding something too. We didn't do anything dramatic, we didn't need to. He shifted up the bed and I moved over and we just were there side by side, his shoulder against mine in the dark. Simple, terrifying, easy. For what it's worth, I said after a while, the date you went on, I was jealous. I know. You knew. You got very carefully normal when I told you, he paused. You get very carefully normal when something bothers you. Oh. It's actually kind of sweet. That is not the word I would use. He laughed again, quiet, real, the kind of laugh I'd been storing up for a year. We talked until it was past 3 in the morning. Not about big things, not always. Sometimes about nothing, about the bird book he'd bought, about whether the Thai place would still be open on Sundays, about his cousin's birthday party and whether he was going to survive it. Normal things, except they felt different now, the way the same room feels different when the light changes. I don't think either of us slept much. When it started getting light, that early gray that happens before actual sunrise, Derek said, "Can I ask you something else?" "You're going to anyway." "Fair." He was quiet for a second. "Are you scared?" I thought about it honestly. Yeah, a little. Me too. What are you scared of? He turned his head to look at me. We were both on our backs looking at the ceiling, and when he looked over, the distance between us was very small. That I'll be bad at this, that I'm going to hurt you without meaning to while I figure things out, that you deserve someone who has it more together than I do right now. I looked back at him. I've been in love with my best friend for a year. I'm not exactly the picture of having it together either. Something moved across his face. You just said that. Yeah. In love. Don't make it weird. I'm not making it weird, I'm just. He looked back at the ceiling, let out this slow breath. No one's ever said that to me and I believed it before. I didn't say anything for a moment. I mean it, I said finally, for the record. I know, a pause. I think I'm getting there. Can that be enough right now? I'm getting there. I looked at him, at the line of his profile in the early light, at the way he was holding himself still, that careful deliberateness, waiting. Yeah, I said, that's enough. He reached over, found my hand and held it. No romantic movie held it, just held it, like something he needed to not let go of. We stayed like that while the room got slowly lighter. Priya knocked on my door at 9 with 2 cups of coffee, cracked it open without waiting for an answer, registered the 2 of us lying there doing absolutely nothing incriminating, said, "Oh thank God," in this very exhausted voice, set the coffees on my nightstand and left. Derek stared at the ceiling. Did she just? She's been waiting for this for approximately 11 months, I said. He started laughing, couldn't stop for a while. And I was laughing too, and it felt like something that had been held very tight was finally letting go, and the morning was coming in through the curtains and his hand was still in mine. The thing about that night that I still think about, almost 2 years later, because we've been together almost 2 years now, which still catches me off guard sometimes in the best way, is that nothing about it was what I expected. I'd played out a version of this scenario in my head more times than I could count. Some version where there was a moment, a clearly defined moment where things changed, where it was cinematic and certain and there was no ambiguity, no stumbling, no 2 people talking in the dark trying to say something hard in the most honest way they could. Real life gave us stumbling. Real life gave us Derek sitting on the edge of my bed saying, "I'm still figuring out what I am, but I know how I feel about you," and that being somehow more right than any clean, certain version I'd ever imagined. He did come out, eventually. Bisexual, he says now, with a kind of calm certainty he had to work up too slowly, which I got to watch and which was one of the more beautiful things I've seen a person do: figure themselves out. Decide who they are with some care and a lot of honesty and not that much fanfare. Very Derek. His mom was great, for the record. She cried and then made him a very large meal, which is her language. My family had technically already met him as my best friend, so the reveal was mostly just, "Oh, so the visits make sense now," which made my dad laugh for about 5 minutes straight. Priya was maid of honor at our wedding. I'm getting ahead of myself, we're not married yet. But she has been told in very clear terms that this is her future role and she has accepted. There are still moments sometimes when I look at Derek across a room, when he's doing something ordinary, folding laundry, making coffee, reading, whatever, and I get this flash of what it felt like to watch him from a distance. Wanting something I thought I'd never have the right to want, carrying it around because the alternative was losing him. And then he looks up and sees me looking and does this thing where one corner of his mouth does that small upward thing, that "I see you seeing me" thing, and I don't know how to explain what that does. I genuinely don't. It's such a small thing, it probably wouldn't read as anything to anyone else. It's everything to me. The last thing I'll say is this, because I want to be honest about what this story is and isn't. This isn't a story about a gay guy who fixed his straight best friend. Derek isn't a project. He didn't need to be rescued or unlocked or figured out by someone else's love. He figured himself out. He did that work on his own in his own time, and he got there. This is a story about two people who were too scared to say something true, and the night one of them finally stopped being scared enough. That's it, that's the whole thing. It turns out that's a lot.